Let me be real with you right out of the gate. This Kawhi Leonard to Golden State talk sounds like the kind of story that keeps getting passed around, because people want something dramatic to hold on to while the season feels shaky. That is what makes it dangerous. Fans hear a big name, they picture Steph, Kawhi, Draymond, and suddenly it starts sounding believable. But once you slow down and look at the actual league rules, the money, the trade value, and the Clippers side of it, the whole thing starts falling apart fast. The part that gets ignored is simple. The Clippers did not give up years of assets, move into a billion-dollar arena, and build their entire public identity around star power just to flip Kawhi for a light package that does not move their franchise forward. A deal built around Brandon Podziemski and a mid-first-round pick is not something Los Angeles takes seriously if they still see Kawhi as part of their competitive image. That is not disrespect toward Podziemski either. It is just the reality of how front offices value top-level names, especially when ownership has invested that much money and pride into staying relevant in a packed Western Conference. And from the Warriors' angle, this is where it gets even more uncomfortable. The franchise is not sitting in some perfect position with endless flexibility and premium assets ready to be pushed to the middle of the table. Golden State has already boxed itself into a tough place financially. Big contracts, second apron pressure, and a roster that has not looked stable enough make these fantasy trades feel even more detached from real life. That is the part fans deserve to hear straight. There is no easy rescue coming through the door. No magic call from Milwaukee, no miracle package for Kawhi, no clean shortcut back to the top just because the logo on the jersey still carries weight. What actually matters now is not the rumor itself, but what it reveals about where the Warriors are. The real conversation should be about how much ownership is willing to keep paying for a roster that has not justified the cost, and how aggressive Mike Dunleavy Jr. can really be with so many restrictions hanging over this team. That is the real pressure point going into the summer. Not a Hollywood deal, not recycled fantasy. The Warriors still have Steph, and that means the urgency is real. But urgency does not erase CBA rules or change what other teams know about your leverage. Warriors Nation, subscribe right now because the next few weeks could bring some huge news for this franchise. Comment, the dynasty is not over, if you believe this team still has another serious push left in it. Because that is where this gets interesting. If Kawhi is not the answer, and Giannis-level dreams stay out of reach, then the next move has to come from sharper thinking, not louder headlines. And that is exactly why the next part of this story matters so much more than the rumor everybody keeps repeating, because there is another situation around the league quietly building that could affect Golden State's summer in a very real way, and once that door opens, the Warriors may have a chance to move before the rest of the conference sees it coming, because the bigger opportunity might not be sitting in the superstar aisle at all. It might be sitting in the cracks, in the places smart front offices watch while everyone else is arguing over names that were never truly available. That is where Golden State has to be sharper than it has been. Around the league, the teams that survive this part of the cycle are usually the ones that stop chasing the headline and start studying where pressure is building. One front office gets squeezed, one owner gets impatient, one investigation changes the timing of an off-season, and suddenly a market opens that did not look open a month earlier. That is where real movement starts. And this is why the Clippers situation deserves more attention than the fantasy trade machine. When an organization is dealing with outside noise, league scrutiny, and a roster that carries both age and injury questions, everything around them gets more fragile. Not necessarily broken, but fragile. That matters. It affects posture, it affects confidence, it affects how aggressive they can be and what kind of deals they might consider if the summer turns uncomfortable. Maybe it is not Kawhi. Maybe it is never Kawhi. But a strained team can still become a source of useful pieces, draft positioning shifts, or three-team structures that suddenly help somebody like Golden State get cleaner access to the kind of depth this roster badly needs. That is the part Warriors fans should keep their eyes on. Not the fantasy of one blockbuster saving everything, but the possibility that a chaotic summer creates smaller openings that actually matter. A reliable two-way wing, a tougher bench piece, a movable contract another team wants out of, a rotation player who becomes available because a rival franchise needs room, relief, or a reset. Those are the types of moves that change a season without dominating national TV debate for a week. And if Golden State wants to squeeze one more real run out of the Steph era, that front office has to start behaving like every edge matters. because right now it does. The other side of this is the money, and there is no hiding from it anymore. The Warriors are staring at a financial reality that gets uglier the longer people pretend this roster is one lucky break away from looking whole. Once you get deep into second apron territory, it is not just expensive, it is restrictive. It closes doors. It limits creativity. It turns every roster decision into something heavier than fans usually realize. That is why this offseason is not only about talent evaluation, it is about pain tolerance. How much more are you willing to spend on a group that has not looked close enough to justify the bill? That question is coming, whether people like it or not. If you are tired of surface-level noise and you want the full picture before the national outlets catch up, this is the moment to subscribe, because the next stretch is where truth starts separating from content farming. The teams that move first, the contracts that quietly become tradable, the franchises feeling pressure behind closed doors. That is where the real story lives, and that is exactly what we are tracking here before it hits the mainstream cycle. Right? Experience wins games. If you still believe the veterans on this team can give Golden State one more serious push, because once the season ends, the language around this franchise is going to change fast. The soft talk disappears, the financial pressure gets exposed, and the market starts showing which teams are actually stable and which ones are holding on by a thread. And there is one developing situation back east right now that could send a shock through the whole league if the next decision goes the way some people inside basketball think it might. When that piece drops, the Warriors' conversation changes with it, and that is where this starts getting even more serious. Because once another franchise reaches that point where patience turns into pressure, the whole board starts moving. And that is why the smartest people around the league are already looking beyond the loud rumors and watching for the first team that blinks. It is rarely the team everybody is tweeting about all day. Most of the time, it is the organization that has been carrying tension for months, smiling in public, saying the right things, and quietly realizing the current version is not good enough to justify the cost, the expectations, or the timeline of its star players. For Golden State, that matters more than any recycled superstar fantasy ever could. The Warriors do not need another fake headline to make the summer feel alive. They need instability somewhere else to create access. That is how teams in a tight cap environment survive. You wait for discomfort to show up in another building, then you move with purpose before the rest of the market fully adjusts. Maybe that means a veteran rotation piece becomes available when a team tries to get younger. Maybe it means a scorer with a heavy contract suddenly has less leverage than expected. Maybe it means draft capital changes hands in a way that opens a lane for a creative three-team structure. Those are the kinds of moves that look quiet in June and feel huge by January. And the Warriors have to be honest with themselves this time. No more pretending sentiment can carry a roster. No more acting like the old formula will suddenly start working because the memories are still strong. Steph is still good enough to force urgency into every room in that building. That is the truth. But urgency without clarity is how franchises make desperate choices and call them bold. Golden State cannot afford that mistake again. This front office has to separate what sounds exciting from what actually raises the floor, sharpens the rotation, and gives this team a cleaner chance to survive the grind of a full season. That is where the next few weeks become so important. Front offices around the league are already sketching out summer maps, and the teams with aging stars or expensive disappointment are the ones everybody is monitoring. One bad internal meeting, one ownership dispute over spending, one playoff collapse, one medical concern that changes how a contract is viewed, and suddenly, names that felt locked in start becoming part of real conversations. Not fantasy, real conversations. That is the world the Warriors need to be ready for, because if they sit around waiting for a miracle, they are going to lose time they do not have. If this is the kind of Warriors coverage you have been looking for, where the story gets treated with some honesty instead of being dressed up for clicks, this is the point where you need to subscribe and stay close, because the next phase of this offseason is not going to reward casual attention. The first signs always show up before the big outlets frame the narrative, and once the headlines catch up, the best angles are already gone. That is why being early matters right now more than ever for this team. If you're part of Warriors Nation and you want to follow every chapter of this team's journey, subscribe now. Comment "Champions Never Quit" if you believe Golden State still has enough pride in that locker room to make one more serious run matter. Because there is another layer to all of this that has not been fully unpacked yet. There is a front office in the East facing a decision that could reshape the trade market in a way the Warriors cannot ignore, and if that domino falls, a few teams in the West are going to realize they waited too long to position themselves. That is where this gets tense, because once that first move happens, the league stops talking in hypotheticals and starts dealing in consequences. And that is why this offseason will tell us a lot about whether Golden State is still operating with championship discipline or just living off championship memory. The margin for error is gone now. Every contract matters. Every trade call matters. Every decision around Steph matters more than ever. The next move does not need to be flashy, but it does need to be right, because one smart adjustment can change the feel of this team a whole lot faster than another summer spent chasing noise. Right with Steph until the end, if you believe this franchise still owes Curry one more real shot with the right pieces around him. And if you want Warriors coverage that stays ahead of the rumors, breaks down what actually matters, and gives you the full picture before the big stories explode, subscribe to the channel right now and stay locked in, because the next update could change everything around this team.